Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us. So we're just over a week since President Trump's resounding victory on November 5th. A lot of stuff has happened since that victory. This week, President Trump was due back in court in that New York courtroom in front of Judge Juan Merchant, where he was set to be sentenced for that Stormy Daniels hush money sham case that was brought by Alvin Bragg and Tish James. Judge Merchant now delaying that sentencing another week while President Trump's lawyers file a brief to have that case dismissed. So we'll keep an eye on that and keep you guys up to date on where that case is leading and any other further rulings from Judge Juan Merchant. Well, President Trump is hard at work trying to build his team and his cabinet for his next administration. I want to go through some of these people so far that President Trump has appointed to positions in his cabinet and in the White House. So for his cabinet so far, he's got Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, these are all pending Senate confirmation, of course, but who President Trump has tapped so far. So Marco Rubio has been tapped for Secretary of State. Former Congressman, New York Congressman, and New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin tapped to head up the EPA. Congresswoman from New York, Elise Stefanik, tapped to run the UN ambassadorship program they have running over there. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. Ambassador to Israel, the great Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor. John Ratcliffe, former DNI, is tapped to head up the CIA. And then, of course, Susie Wiles, President Trump's campaign manager, is tapped as chief of staff, with former Trump advisor Stephen Miller being tapped as her deputy. So this cabinet's starting to be shaped up a little bit, as we come into these weeks after the election, as we look towards January, where President Trump will be sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. I know, just about 2 weeks ago, we were all wondering if we'd be saying that. It turns out now he's the 47th president of the United States. Over in Congress later on today, the Senate is going to vote for the next Republican majority leader. And on the ballot is two rhinos and then someone who's sort of middle of the road. You've got John Cornyn and John Thune. And then you've got Rick Scott, who seems to be the choice of the MAGA crowd. Now, Donald Trump has not weighed in on it, given his opinion on who he wants to take that job. But from behind the scenes, the Trump folks seem to be rallying behind Senator Rick Scott. Of course, that ballot is going to be a secretive ballot, and we're not going to find out who exactly voted for who. So it's most likely a rhino will prevail, Cornyn or Thune. Both anti-Trump haters, both anti-Jan 6 people who don't believe those Jan 6 prisoners should be freed. Both people who don't support President Trump or his agenda. So unless that vote's delayed by some grace of God, it's looking like we'll probably have a rhino running the Senate Republican leadership. Over on the House side, the Republicans are holding their internal meetings to elect their GOP positions, so majority leader and whip and all those folks. Conservatives are planning to nominate a challenger to Mike Johnson. Now, this too will be secret ballot, so we won't find out who votes and how they vote, but I think this is to send a message. Now, it's unlikely it'll be successful. We'll probably have Rhino Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House. But with the slim majority that the Republicans have, or they're going to have in Congress by 4 or 5 seats, I think this is to send a message to Mike Johnson to let him know not to play around, just as was sent to Kevin McCarthy, who was ultimately ousted for being a liar and not holding true his Republican values. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Mike Johnson will probably prevail in that election. But I think this is, as Lou would say, it's a warning shot over the bow to let him know not to play any games, and that MAGA won this election, and that President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, and what President Trump says goes. And you will set an agenda for President Trump that makes sense, an agenda that we can get past the House, an agenda that we can get past the Senate, and you will hold forth his border policy that he has run on. Border czar Tom Homan is going to do an excellent job, in my opinion, in shutting down this border and deporting these illegals who have come to this country illegally and have caused crime and brought gangs here and brought drugs here. And the list goes on for that. So our guest today is someone who knows a little bit about the border, someone who ran for Senate in Arizona. He's Sheriff Mark Lamb of Pinal County. He's a great American, and he's been fighting out against illegal immigration for years now. So it's going to be incumbent on President Trump and his team to get it together and make sure that these people are deported and our border is secured, because that's what the American people voted for when they went to vote on November 5th. President Trump was very clear about his plans and what he wanted done and the deportations he wanted done. So it's going to be up to Congress now to go ahead and do that. So like I said, our guest today, Sheriff Mark Lamb of the great state of Arizona. Mark Lamb, thanks so much for joining us today here on the Great America Show. I want to start with a resounding victory, Mark, for President Trump just over a week ago today. It's unbelievable, the historic, unprecedented win we saw, Mark. None of us expected him to win the popular vote. I certainly went on the show on the record and said I didn't expect him to sweep Wisconsin, Michigan, all these states, Arizona, Nevada. Your thoughts now as we sit here a week later and we see this thing become a reality?
Well, I'm like you. First of all, I'm happy as can be. I think a lot of Americans had a big sigh of relief. We've all been on a little bit of a cloud nine this last week, and then seeing some of the people he's already putting in place is making us feel even better. Look, I wasn't surprised that he won. I said I was getting ready to do Trace Gallagher the night of the election, and he right before we went on air, he said, "Were you surprised?" And I said, "I'm surprised by how well he did, how all these states did." I said, "But the minute God stayed him, that bullet missed his head, I knew there was providence behind this race and divine intervention." And so I felt really good about him winning. I kept saying I thought he would win by 5 points in Arizona. What I didn't realize is how well he was going to do in Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Boy, he dominated there, and Arizona was one of the weaker ones. And obviously we can't count votes very well, and it took us several days. But in the end, what a great showing. And I think it really shows, and I hope that the Democrats take notice, because it shows that their policies are failed policies, and Americans are done with them.
Yeah. It was funny. I'm watching on election night. I did a 7-hour live stream on our Rumble channel here, and I see Florida come in with, 11 million votes. Within an hour, Mark, we knew that Donald Trump had won by 13 or so points, absolutely annihilating her. We then go to Arizona, where it's just over 3 million votes, and it takes days and days and days. And now I had Fox News on in the background to see if Brett Baer was maybe going to go ahead and call Arizona early to see with President Trump having the lead. Nonetheless, he didn't. But it's just unbelievable that we cannot get these elections, Mark, counted on election night. It's such a simple procedure. One ballot in, one vote in, boom, one tally on one side, vice versa, vice versa. Yet you have these counties, Mark, that just can't seem to get it back together. One I was surprised for was Arizona, man. You guys came in and you guys showed up, and I think comparatively from 2020, every single county in Arizona went to the right. Some of them 5 points, some of them up to 17 points, I believe, down in Santa Cruz County, 17 points to the right from 2020. I mean, how big of a referendum is this on the Democratic Party and on their ways, their old ways and their old policies, Mark?
Well, it's a huge referendum. The problem is I don't know that they're going to see it. I'm watching some of these news clips, and they're trying to blame each other and find excuses for what's happening.
George Clooney, they're blaming, Mark.
They're calling it misogyny. If the Latin men don't vote for it, they're misogynist. If anybody else, they're racist, or they've abandoned their race, or whatever. They got some excuse for it all. Instead of just saying, look, we've got to see what we did wrong. Right. And I just think that in America, we have a problem with that first and foremost, and we certainly have a problem with it in leadership in America, especially elected officials, of recognizing when they're wrong and course correcting. And they didn't do it. And I don't know that they're going to do it here. I really don't think. I think they still think these are policies that the American people want, despite the fact that the popular vote, the Electoral College, everything went to Trump. He bettered himself in every single county. There wasn't a single county in this country where Kamala did better than Joe Biden did 4 years ago. So I hope that they open their eyes. I don't know that they will. They should.
What was I think it was HR 1 or HR 2, that border bill that Kamala came out and said, well, Donald Trump could have shut down the border and he could have done it But he called his cronies and his minions in the Senate and the House and said, you kill that bill right now. Unbelievable. We see her at speaking out at many campaign events and then on the stage with Donald Trump. But the truth of the matter is, Marcus, they admitted the silent part out loud, is that we can shut down the border. We don't need a bill to follow the law. I mean, it doesn't get much dumber than that. And she's sitting there saying, well, Donald Trump killed this bill, the bill that said we can allow 6,000 illegals in a day. And then after we hit that 6,000 illegal mark, then we shut down the border. I mean, it was the biggest bullshit scam, Mark, I'd ever seen in my entire life. My question to you is, do you think, I know you're saying that you don't think the Democrats see the writing in the mirror, or the writing on the wall rather, but do you think now with all this crazy rhetoric we heard them say and how in favor they were of this House resolution that secured the border, do you think now they'll be open to working with President Trump to shut down that border once and for all?
No, they'll be right back to fighting with them. Look, and first of all, it wasn't H.R. 2. H.R. 2 was actually a pretty decent bill that came out of the House, which the Senate just kind of threw dirt on, and they never really brought it to the forefront. That was a pretty decent bill. And look, they had no intention of passing the border bill that Kamala Harris was talking about. Yeah. That was a global assistance bill. That was money going to Ukraine and all over the place. And it had about $20 billion going to the border. So first of all, it was not a border bill. They labeled it as a border bill. They never intended for that to pass. All they wanted was for a few Republicans to sign off on it. And they knew that they were going to use this as a campaign ploy to go out and say, look, see, we tried to fix the border and the Republicans didn't want to fix it. The reality is, and this is where I was really disappointed with Republicans along this campaign trail, they didn't do enough to just crush that bill because they didn't want to hurt each other's feelings for those who did sign on to it. And the reality was it was a disastrous bill, especially the border piece. They wanted to codify into law the fact that 5,000 people a day for 7 days straight. If you only hit 5 days straight, you'd start all over again. Or even on the seventh day, if you only hit 4,500, it starts all over again. The acceptable number for Americans should be 0. That's what it should be, 0. So that was the first thing. The second one, we're struggling financially. We don't have money to be sending all over the place. They wanted to give another $2.3 billion to the same NGOs who are currently aiding and abetting in this trafficking of humans into this country. They're being financially incentivized to continue this problem. And then they wanted to give another $9 billion to the State Department which would ultimately end up in the UN's hands for global migration. So that money was going to continue to fund the invasion into our country. That's $11 billion of our hard-earned tax dollars that was going to continue to go there. I could go on and on, but those alone should have been enough to kill the bill. And look, in the end, they can blame President Trump. I'm glad he put pressure, but the senators make their own decisions. He didn't go and push the buttons for them. They said, we're not going to pass this bill. And remember, the Democrats never wanted this bill passed in the first place. What they wanted was for the Republicans to blame Republicans during the campaign trail. They succeeded. Republicans failed on destroying this bill and that narrative.
You're absolutely right. And, you mentioned the Senate, and that's going to be a big fight now coming up later today. They're hosting a silent vote in the Senate. Who's going to be the leader? And I mean, it's between two rhinos and someone who's sort of middle of the road, John Cornyn, Thune, and Rick Scott. Now, I don't think Rick Scott's the greatest man for the job, but he's the only man in the ring who's thrown his hat in there to go ahead and lead the Senate after Froghorn Leghorn Mitch McConnell decides he's finally had enough. We're going to take a quick break here. We're talking with Sheriff Mark Lamb of Pinal County. We're coming right back to take up what's going to happen in this next administration. Some of these political appointments. Tom Homan, who I think is one of the greatest guys you could have picked to be border czar, is going to be leading the effort. We're going to take that up with Mark Lamb when we return. Stay with us.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen-size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size, only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use My Pillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size My Pillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
We're back. We're talking with Sheriff Mark Lamb of Pinal County, a great American. I think he's done an excellent job doing what he can with the hand he's dealt down in the great state of Arizona with the Marxists, doing all they can to stop the Republicans from shutting down this border invasion once and for all. But we have a new light, Mark, and that light is by a man that goes by the name of Tom Homan. I want to play for the audience, those of you who haven't watched this show or just started watching this show and hadn't watched Lou for years. Tom Homan was on our show all the time. I want to play a clip from Tom Homan of the Senate Judiciary Committee 2 years ago or so, just so you can get an idea of who Tom Homan is and how much he cares what you think of him.
You want to know I have these issues because you have failed to secure the border. You have failed to work with this president to close the 3 loopholes we've asked for 2 years to close. So if you want to know why this issue exists, you need to look in the mirror. You have failed American people for not securing the border and closing loopholes.
Mr. Homan, please respect the chair and the authority of the chair. The time of the gentleman has expired.
I've asked you politely to let me go beyond my time, and you let other people go beyond their time, but not to Tom Homan. He don't get to go beyond his time.
Mr. Homan, we have approved an agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats with the ranking member. We increased the time of one member of Congress who was interrupted by a protest. That is done with the approval of the ranking member. Please respect the chair's authority.
I respect the chair's authority, but the chair...
Mr. Homan!
You work for me. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. You work for me.
The witness will suspend.
I think I like him so much because I can relate to him. My whole life I've had to have the last word, Mark. And Tom just didn't give a shit what she said.
Oh, I love it.
He's so right. But how do you feel now that that's going to be the man leading our border fight?
Well, you said it's a bright light, but I can only picture this as it's dark. You see this bright light coming as it gets closer. You realize it's a freight train. And that's what he's a freight train coming at you. And you know what? This is what we need. Look, I've always said we've created these hard times, and the only way out of them is through hard decisions and hard consequences.
Yep.
Look, people are going to blame the work that needs to be done now, but who they should be blaming are the people that created these problems that are now going to take really tough times to fix. That's what true leadership is. True leadership is we're going to do what's right. People may not like it. They're going to say things about us. The media is going to report on us. The politicians are going to try to stifle us. But in the end, Tom was right. These folks forget that they work for for us, we the people. And I love that Tom is a real man. He's a real American. He's a alpha male. And you know what? He's going to go in there and he's going to execute and do the job that has been asked of him to do. And I'm pretty dang excited. I think he's going to do a great job. I too messaged him yesterday and just said, "Hey, Tom, congratulations. I couldn't think of anybody better to be the border czar right now."
I texted it with him yesterday. I'll just read the audience a text because he's a short man. It's short, not literally short man, but short with his sentences. I said, Tom, congrats, much deserved. I know Lou is smiling down knowing that POTUS picked the right man for the right job. And he said, "Oh man, God bless the great Lou Dobbs." Because there was very few people who you would cover things like that. And Lou was one of the few people, Mark, who would go on television for years. It wasn't just these last 5 years, Mark. It was the last 20 years about the threats of illegal immigration and what they're doing to our country and the problems it's going to have. When Elon Musk came out and said, if the Republicans lose this election, it's the last election, people said, "Oh, he's crazy. What the hell is he talking about?" No, it's simple, Mark. You bring in 20, 30 million illegals. And that's it. You flood the voter rolls, and a Republican can never win again. It's so simple. But what comes with Tom now is going to be these mass deportations that President Trump promised. A lot of people didn't think he was going to come through on them. We still haven't seen if he's going to, but it seems like he has every intent to. This is Tom Homan on 60 Minutes just a few weeks ago before he got picked for the job on what he plans to do.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
It doesn't get much simpler than that.
Common sense.
I like him so much, Mark, because when she asked him the question about the $88 billion, he says, it's not my wheelhouse. I don't know what the hell it's going to cost. Instead of sitting there saying, well, he's as honest as they come and bluntly honest. But what other way do you do it, Mark? What other way do you deport these folks without, leaving their kids behind?
Well, he said it right. Look, I mean, unfortunately, families are going to have to get deported. Look, the real travesty was letting the people in and giving them false hope.
Yeah.
That was the real travesty, and not holding them accountable to the laws. And so really the people that let them in, which is the Biden-Harris administration for the most part, they are to blame because they've created a problem. And now we're going to have to go and say to these families, hey, look, you came into this country illegally, or the judges ruled that your asylum claim is not legit. Tom broke it down really simple in a couple interviews I've heard since he's been named this. He said, look, first you go after the criminals.
Right.
And I had a friend tell me today, he goes, well, how do you know where the criminals are? If you go work with local law enforcement, we can all sit and tell you exactly where the criminals are and where to find them. A lot of them are sitting in jails right now. And the ones that aren't, they know where they are, because when they were let on bail or bond, they have to give an address of where they're at. So we have a pretty good idea. So you start there. Then you go on to these people that maybe the judge ruled against them and said, you don't have a legitimate asylum claim, but they still haven't left the country. You got to go after them. And we just start, moving through it. And really what this is about is you start to you set a certain narrative that says we cannot tolerate people that broke the law in this country. If you want to be in this country, you got to do it the legal way. And I think a lot of people are going to self-deport. They're going to go back home on their own, because this is going to tighten up on them. And it should. I've lived in other countries. If you were there illegally, trust me, you'd be a lot more nervous than they are here. They should be nervous. They came into this country illegally, or they haven't adhered to the judge's orders on removal, or there might be a myriad of different things. Unfortunately, the people that caused this are not going to fix it. We're now going to have to fix it, and they're going to be mad at the people who fix it, but it has to be done.
Yeah, and you're getting these blue city mayors where you got that, and governors as well. You got that tough guy up in Illinois. What the hell is his name? The big guy who looks like George Conway.
Well, he certainly isn't tough. I think he's pretty soft. I mean, he's a
literally
wealthy dude. I wouldn't use the term tough for him.
I should say wannabe tough guy, who are saying you won't come to this city, you won't come to this state and touch anybody. But then you got guys like Mayor Eric Adams, who is in a little bit of trouble right now. It seems like he's a little bit more willing to work with Donald Trump probably than ever before, maybe looking for a partner of some sort. He's against mass deportations, but says he's open with President Trump to go ahead and fixing this immigration system that he was left with under Bill de Blasio. They estimate about 500,000 illegals are in New York. I think that number is probably underestimated, probably like 2 or 3%, 2 or 3 times because of what's really going on there. But Tom Homan saying too, we're going to go do workplace deportations. We're going to show up to your job. They know where they are, Mark. They know where these people are. They know where they live. They know where they sleep. They know where they work illegally. They can go out there and get them. And at the end of the day, it is sad, Mark, because there are people who are good people who came here seeking a better life. But at the end of the day, you're a criminal. According to the law, Mark, you're a criminal, whether you're a grandmother, whether you're a gang member, you're criminals. You came into this country illegally. You're not supposed to be here. You didn't follow the proper protocol. You've got to go. It doesn't get much simpler than that. What do you think we're going to see, for instance, in a state like yours, where you have a Marxist Dem governor, but you've got great Republican sheriffs like you who are going to listen to the federal government and deport these folks?
Well, look, I appreciate the 10th Amendment and the states' rights. I really do.
Yeah.
However, they've consistently said, no, this is a federal problem. Okay, well, now the federal government's going to come in and do their job. It's tough for the governors to now say, well, we're not going to let you. Pick your poison, I think that Tom Homan also mentioning those workplace things, I don't think that's high on the list. However, Tom brought up a really good point. he says all of this human trafficking and sex trafficking that you hear about, a lot of that work trafficking, that hard labor, is at the workplaces.
Yeah.
And basically, if you say we shouldn't go after the workplaces, you're basically allowing for the continuance of this trafficking for hard labor, sex trafficking. So I hope that people understand, like this, there are people involved with it on both. There's two sides to this. We've got to save a lot of these people from being trafficked in the hard labor. Yeah. Arizona is going to be a weird state because we just passed a measure that should go into effect pretty quick. I can only imagine that this administration would have challenged it, but now with the new DOJ, I don't think that they're going to challenge it. And it's the people that spoke. They said, look, we want a law that says if you come into this country illegally in the state of Arizona, we want that to be a law here too. And we want that to be able to deport it. We want to hold people accountable who sell fentanyl. We want to hold people accountable who present false ID. And that's what Proposition 314 was. It passed with 62% of Arizonans. So this is going to make our ability to help the federal government a lot easier.
Yeah, and Mark, at the end of the day, it's the will of the people. We're going to take that up on the other side of this. We're taking one more quick break. We're talking with Sheriff Mark Lamb of Pinal County. We're going to talk about the House's responsibility, the Senate's responsibility, and how they're going to make sure this thing is secured. Maybe the Supreme Court gets involved, and that's the thing I'm most nervous about. I'm going to take that up with Mark on the other side of this quick break. We're coming right back with Mark Lamb. Stay with us.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra My Pillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic My Pillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen size My Pillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use My Pillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size My Pillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
We're back, folks. Thanks for staying with us through that short break. We're talking with Sheriff Mark Lamb of Pinal County, a great American, as I've said, and I'm sure you've figured out by now. Mark, the people have spoken with this election, this referendum. Trump won Starr County, Texas, a border town, the most Hispanic county in America, at 97% by 16 points. It hasn't been won by a Republican since the last seen by a Republican since 1892. I don't know what yells a bigger referendum on this country than seeing what we've seen this election. Now, people are going to go back and forth about how we do these deportations, who we deport. Do we let the people who are law-abiding citizens, taxpayer citizens, stay here? There's going to be an argument on that front. Do we let the people in the middle stay? Do we let the anchor baby stay? Do we, the list goes on and on. And as I said before we went to break, the issue I think we're going to see is from the Supreme Court, like we've seen with DACA, that's been stuck up in the courts for years and years and years, and we can't get an official ruling on it to get these people out of here. That DACA is unconstitutional. It should have never been allowed in the first place, yet Barack Obama allowed it. What do you see happening when it comes to things like the Supreme Court stepping in?
Well, look, first of all, when you talk about the deportations, one more thing about that is this is a Congress and Senate issue. Look, there's border security, there's immigration. The two are oftentimes intertwined. And Congress and Senate have continually failed to put forth some clear and common sense immigration. There's no doubt that needs to be addressed and adjusted. I think most Americans would agree. We should make it easier for businesses to bring employees over. There should be some processes in place. It's jacked up, and it's because it's in the hands of government and they can't run a hot dog stand. And Congress and Senate continue to use this as a political hot potato. So they've got to come together. And maybe this is the time, these 2 years under President Trump, put some bills together that they can get through that will be common sense, that Republicans and even a lot of Democrats can live with. And let's fix that piece of it, because that's going to help a lot of the deportation piece of it as well, is being able to get more common sense rules in place. But in the end, look, this is something that we were talking on the break, the immigration's not in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 talks about Congress having the authority to establish uniform rules of naturalization. Is naturalization the same as immigration? I would contend it's not. Right. And so now immigration has kind of been given to Congress over the years through the Supreme Court, through the other courts. And so I think this is where the struggle has been on this whole Texas issue, now Arizona, is who really does have this ability, and where does this fall? And so it's going to be curious. I'm anxious to see how this plays out. But you're right. Whether it's the courts or the politicians, they continue to hold these things up, and we got to get some results if we're going to fix these problems long term.
Yeah, one of the big issues that it's always overstepped. You hear very few people talking about it. Derek Malta, a former DEA guy,
great guy,
very good guy. He has taken on the drug issue like nobody else, blowing the whistle on everything. Because the truth of the matter is, Mark, we have hundreds of thousands of people a year. Everyone wants to talk about gun violence. Why don't they go look at the statistics of gun violence and who's dying for the most from gun violence? Who's doing the shootings and what's the situation? And then it'll be a real eye opener to, if you compare it to how many people are dying from fentanyl overdoses, kids who are dying thinking now they shouldn't be doing cocaine in the first place, but thinking they're doing cocaine and it's laced with fentanyl. Someone smoking marijuana that's laced with some sort of fentanyl that's come through the southern border through China that we've allowed to happen. That's what the people I want to wake up and open their eyes. Those people who have had loved ones die. Those people have seen firsthand in their backyard these drugs pouring across their border. These thugs in these big blue cities who allow this stuff to go on under our eyes. That's, Mark, another issue that doesn't get spoken about enough. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad you brought up two things. So first of all, you're right. The leading cause of death in America between the ages of 18 and 45 is fentanyl. 100,000 Americans a year. How is this not like the top issue on the news every night? They're killing way more Americans than any terrorist act has ever killed. I would contend this is terrorism. It's just quiet. They haven't fired a single shot or set off a single bomb, yet they're killing 100,000 Americans a year. And we know where it comes from. China puts it into the hands, who they're not our friend, by the way, puts it in the hands of the cartels. The cartels then bring it into America. You mentioned the gun laws, the statistics on gun violence. They're really crafty on how they do these statistics. They say that it's the leading cause of death for children are guns right now. Well, let me break that down really quick. First of all, it barely edges out accidents. But do you know that they take out 0 to 1? And they add in 18 and 19-year-olds because they can say this is the leading cause of death for teenagers and children. If you take out 19-year-olds, you take out 18-year-olds, and you add back in 0 to 1, even if you don't add back into 0 to 1, the leading cause of death is traffic accidents for children. They had to add in adults to even make that statistic work. And a lot of that statistic is suicides, unfortunately. So they're using these statistics. They could, even adding 18 and 19-year-olds, they were barely able to get it to where it was more than accidents. But the leading cause of death for children or young kids under 18 is going to be accidents.
Yeah, and we've heard in the first Trump administration, I forgot who it was, one of his Mark Esper, that idiot Mark Esper, came out and said, "You can't believe what Trump wanted to do. Trump wanted to come out and blow up all the drugs, send bombs blow up the drug facilities." Because they know where they are, obviously through global weather footprints, they can see where the heats are emitting through thermal photography. They can see where they're cooking the drugs and doing all that stuff. So the Trump administration reported, now this is unconfirmed, but this is what Mark Esper was reporting. I hope it was true because it's the most brilliant idea. So Trump wanted to go ahead and send bombs in there and blow up and annihilate these drug making facilities. And Trump, came out and said, whatever he said, but it's absolutely, I think, totally brilliant because how you said it perfectly. These people are terrorists, Mark.
Are we just going to turn a blind eye to the fact that they're killing 100,000 Americans?
More than that.
And if we had a military, if we had terrorists, look, we went to war for 20 years, and I don't want to take away from anything from 9/11. We lost, 3,600 Americans, more or less. We went to war for 20 years. We're losing 100,000 Americans a year right now, and the cartels are doing it, and so is China. and yet we don't go after them. I just think it's appalling that we make no effort to hold the people accountable that are killing Americans. And so I do like that he's saying this. Now, I get that people are misconstruing what he's saying. You need to work with Mexico. Mexico wants a willing partner. But what they had for the last 4 years was a weak administration that didn't have the resolve to go after these cartels. And so why is Mexico going to lock horns alone with the cartels if America's an unwilling partner? I think that they know that Trump is willing now, and I think these two can come together and eliminate these cartels.
Yeah, and Mark, I don't advocate for wars. I hate wars. I think they're absolutely unnecessary in most cases, the ones at least we've been in the last 25 or so years. But if we were to go to war with somebody, I wouldn't not be unhappy if it was Mexico, because like you said perfectly, more people have died from drug overdoses than any of the wars that we fought in over the last 25 years overseas that were absolutely over nothing. This is over something. And if the Mexican government, from the most part, it seems they're complicit in it because the politicians are all corrupt as hell. They know what's going on. They're either too scared because they know these cartels will go ahead and kill their families and such, or they're getting kickbacks on it. One way or another, that's not a way to live, Mark. They're harboring these terrorists, allowing them to come through their country, allowing drugs to be shipped into their country and then sent on to America. That's an act of terrorism. So if we were to go in and do something with Mexico, I wouldn't be completely opposed to it. Something I've seen, Mark, and I'm sure you've seen.
By the way, we're allowing this too, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. We let them on the board.
Our own politicians are allowing it. So I don't know that this is Mexico would be a willing partner. They're a great partner for trade. They're great in everything. We have a common problem, and the common problem is cartels.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's going to take somebody to go ahead and do something about it. And it seems like nobody really has the willpower to go about it. You're in Arizona, Mark. I've traveled now over the last 10 years or so, all over the place, all over the world, all over America. And some of my domestic traveling I've done, I've been to Nashville in the last few months. I've been to Vegas in the last few months. I've been to Texas in the last few months. And I spent a little bit of time in Atlantic City when I have some time. And it's not just homeless people on the street anymore, Mark, that you used to see just sitting down asking for money. The trend I've seen now going is these people are on some sort of new drug where they look like they're absolutely dead. I don't know what the drug is, but it's something now it must be a new phenomenon, because these people, Mark, they'll be like stead frozen on the side of the road, just not there, but there. It makes absolutely no sense to me. And I think we're going to continue to see it get worse. This is something I've seen now over the last, I would want to say 3 or 4 years. So it's not just people smoking marijuana anymore. It's not just people doing heroin anymore. There's something that's being added into the society that's absolutely zombifying people. Do you see that down in Arizona? Have you seen anything in Pinal County that over the last few years has changed?
Well, we don't see it as much in Pinal County, but we certainly see it in the bigger cities. Phoenix got a little bit of it, but I went to Philadelphia, I went to Kensington. You see it. I don't know if it's the xylazine that they put into the fentanyl or the kratom, but there's a couple different things that are causing that. They call it the fentanyl fold, where they're folded over and sleeping in it. Somehow they don't fall over. I hate to see my fellow Americans and fellow human beings. It breaks my heart to see people, going through this, and they've completely lost themselves. They're just basically a shell of what they used to be. And having had a son who had gone through and struggled with drug addiction, I'll tell you, that's why I fight so hard against drugs. I don't want other families to have to go through it, and we can do something about it. And I just think that we owe it to the American people to do something about it. That's why me and my deputies fight hard every day to stop the drugs from coming in, stop the humans from being smuggled. And we expect the federal government to do the same. And I'm grateful for this administration, Tom Homan, a lot of other people that I have no doubt are going to come in and get this ship back on the right course. And we're going to get this country fixed.
Yeah, and I think the death penalty is something that needs to be reenacted for these drug dealers, Mark. We got to send a message to these people that here, for instance, Mark, here in New York, someone gets caught selling cocaine. They're arrested and they're let out within just hours. I have a lot of friends who are New York Police Department officers, and they say to me, we don't even care about arresting people anymore because they're right back out on the street in a few hours. They see a judge, they're back out with no bail. They've got to do something, and I think the death penalty is something that I think President Trump needs to look at strongly for these people who are doing this to our kids. They're doing it to these families. They're destroying families. They're ripping them apart with these drugs that they're selling to these people. And I think something needs to be done. The death penalty is one that I've rarely advocated for, but I think in this situation needs to be looked at. I want to wrap up with here, and we appreciate you joining us today, Mark. Later on today, the Senate is meeting, and they're going to nominate a new majority leader. We've got two rhinos, John Cornyn, John Thune, and we've got Rick Scott. Of course, it's a secret ballot. Someone who ran for Senate, Mark. What's your take on this, how it should go? Should it be a secret ballot, or should we let the American people see what our senators are up to?
No, I don't think it should be a secret ballot. I think we elected those folks to go back there, and we should be aware of the process that's going on. I don't really know all three of them very well. I don't really even know John Thune. I know there's been some questionable Second Amendment stuff with a couple of those guys. Look, in the end, if I was picking today, I'd pick Rick Scott. I think he's going to be more in line with where we need to go with the Trump administration, with where the country needs to go. I don't want to go backwards towards that other stuff. I don't want to fight with ourselves for like we did the first round, where we had guys like Paul Ryan in there that were holding everything up. We just can't afford that. We've got to get on board, all of us together, all Republicans get on board. It may be, outside the comfort zone for some of the Republicans, but we've got to get the country fixed. And then we can start, getting back to figuring out where you fall and where we fall. But in the end, we got to hold together and get this country back. And we owe it to the American people. And that starts with our leadership at the top coming together. And I think that Rick Scott would be a great choice.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see things differently around this time around, Mark. Apparently, the Republicans in Congress, in the House, are planning to nominate a conservative option to Mike Johnson. So we'll see what happens with that too. But I think people have had enough. And with this razor-thin majority that the Republicans are going to have in the House, like they had with Kevin McCarthy, I think they do hold his feet to the fire to get Trump's agenda done. You mentioned Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan's first act when he set the agenda for President Trump was to go after healthcare. It took a year and a half before they figured out healthcare. They lost it anyway, couldn't get rid of Obamacare. And by the time that wrapped up, we had a Democrat Congress where President Trump was stifled to do anything. So it's unbelievable. Sheriff Mark Lamb, where can people follow you and see all that you're up to these days, and what's next for you when your term as sheriff expires?
Well, my website is sherifflamb.com. You can also catch me at American Sheriff on Instagram, and Sheriff Lamb 1 on Twitter, and Sheriff Lamb on Facebook. But come check out Sheriff Lamb. I actually got some bobbleheads that are coming in, getting shipped in tomorrow. And, something fun. Like to have fun doing what we do.
There you go. Lou's dream job, by the way, was to be sheriff of Sussex, New Jersey, where he lived. Unfortunately, he didn't get to live to do that. But his dream job was to always be a sheriff and wear a cowboy hat like that and have a revolver to the side.
God
Mark,
rest his soul. He was a good man. So
absolutely. Mark Lamb, you're a great American as well. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Great American.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being with us today, folks. We appreciate you joining us. Mark Lamb's a great American and fierce fighter in this fight to save our country from a broken border and woke ideologies. Please be sure to join us back here tomorrow for the Great America Show as our quest for truth, justice, and the American way continues. Be sure to follow us on our new Instagram page at The Great America Show on Instagram. The Great America Show on Instagram. You can also follow me on Twitter at John Fawcett NY and on Truth Social at John Fawcett. You could also email us. For anyone who doesn't out on social media, we're giving you every single way you can contact us, folks. So if you got a problem with this show or you want to hear something or you got something to say, we've given you every single out except for a phone number, which we can't give out, of course. But you can go ahead and email us at info@loudobbs.com. So social media, email, wherever you want to reach us, let us know what you think of the show. If you got any opinions or you want us to bring some guests on the show, be sure to let us know. Until then, we'll see you back here tomorrow. May God bless you all. May God bless America, and may God bless the great Lou Dobbs.